Thank you so much for our music this morning, but I want to say to you that I am disappointed. All of this time, I thought that Terry was actually playing that thing over there. And did you notice it's all automatic? He pushed one button and it started and it played till they got through. He's a phony. That's what he is. Oh man, I'm being silly, you know that. Thank you all for the music, but I thought that was kind of cute. Well, and then everything happened all at once. Let me thank you for responding to my little, not the sermon, but the other message I gave you last Sunday about attendance. During the summer, when people are going and coming, and the ones of us who are at home need to make an extra effort to come on Wednesday and to be here on Sunday and be involved. And you did so much better as a group last Wednesday than the week before. We were more than double. And we need to keep doing that through the summer, especially through the summer, and pray for our church committee and that sort of thing. So please continue to come and support as best you can everything your church is doing. Your church is like many. You never do anything just to do it. You do it because it's something good that needs to be done. So don't ever feel like you're just coming for busyness. What we're doing is worth doing, or we wouldn't plan it, and we wouldn't participate, we wouldn't encourage you to come. So please do that. Thank you for what you've been doing. Now, last Sunday, I preached on a parable of Jesus from Matthew, Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13. And we did the first parable that's in that chapter that comes to us from the Gospel of Matthew. It was the parable about the seeds and the sower. You remember, and I'm not going to redo it, but I want to tell you a different application that we didn't have time for last Sunday. And this will just be not connected to today, but just by itself. The parable of the sower was, the sower went out with seed, and he sowed the seed in his field. Some fell by the wayside, some fell on rocky soil, some fell where there were weeds, and some fell on good soil. Well, in the first three cases, nothing really good happened, but when it fell on the good soil, it brought forth fruit in various amounts, 30, 60, 100-fold. Now, you know the meaning of that. We discussed it. The meaning of that, all of the different soils represent the way we hear or don't hear what God says. Sometimes God says it, just might as well not be said. We didn't hear it all out the wayside. Sometimes we get excited, but it doesn't last. That's the soil that was the rocky ground. Or the weeds choke it out. That's what we hear, and we get so mixed up and busy with just living life, we don't have time for God and the church and things. But sometimes people hear and really pay attention, and fruit comes. Okay? Now you've got that. But there is two meanings, not contradictory, but just two different ways you can look at that parable. The first one is, we're talking about how you hear. The second way that you might never have thought of, unless somebody mentioned it or you saw it in a commentary at some point, this might have been a way Jesus had of encouraging the teachers and the preachers and the Christians who were trying to reach the world. Because sometimes teachers teach Sunday school year after year after year, and often they will say, I just don't think I'm doing any good. People don't seem to be coming. People don't change. It's not having an impact. Well, he's telling us to be faithful. Keep sowing the seed. Some of it might not be hurt. Some might not produce fruit. But keep on, because some does fall on the good soil and fruit will come from it. So don't ever judge too quickly and decide what you are called to do is not working anymore. Things change, things are different, people are different, but you hang in there and be faithful to what you're doing as a church and as an individual. All right, that's over. We want to look at the second parable in Matthew's Gospel this morning, and it's entitled The Parable of the Tares, T-A-R-E-S, and we'll discuss what that is in a moment. We're going to read two different sections of Matthew 13. The first is when Jesus tells the parable, and the second is when he explains the parable, and then we'll draw a few lessons from those two passages. Matthew 13:24 through 30 is the first passage. Another parable set Jesus before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man that sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares also among the wheat and went away. But when the blade sprang up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. And the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, did thou not sow good seed in thy field? Whence then hath it tares? And he said unto them, An enemy has done this. And the servants say unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, No, lest haply while you gather up the tares, ye root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, Gather up first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barns. Now, we have been saying, before we read the other passage, let me give you this definition again. We have been saying that a parable is a very special kind of story. A parable is an ordinary story with a heavenly meaning. Or an ordinary story, common story, with a spiritual meaning. So Jesus has told a story here about a man who sowed his field with good seed, and an enemy came at night and put tares seed into the same field, and when they grew up, it was both the good grain and the tares that were growing. And he said, well, the workers, the slaves, the servants of this man said, I thought we planted good seed. He said, we did. Well, why are the tares there? And he explained that enemy had done that. And then they said, well, you want us to go try to weed the field and get the tares away? And he said, no, you can't do that. It's too late. The sermon of my title is Not Now. They could have done it earlier if it had been possible. Later it will be separated, but not now. You couldn't do a thing. You had to wait for it. Now that's just a story that could have happened. And believe it or not, there are instances we know of where it did happen, that an enemy sowed bad seed into his enemy's field so that that man would not get a good crop. In fact, we are told that even today in India, one way that a man can bring bad to another man's feelings, if not literally, if he only wants to hurt him by saying it, he can say something like this: I will sow bad seed in your field. And that's unusual to us, but not in India, and it was not unusual years ago in the Holy Land. Now that's the story. Let's look then at Jesus' explanation of the story, and we'll get a hint to the spiritual meaning that he is communicating to us. Skip down to verse 36, and then Jesus is going to explain the story he has told. Then Jesus left the multitudes and went into the house, and his disciples came unto him, saying, Explain unto us the parable of the tares of the field. And he answered and said, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man, and the field is the world. And the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom, and the tares are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy that sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are angels. As therefore the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be in the end of the world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that cause stumbling, and them that do iniquity, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their fathers. He that hath ears, let him hear. Jesus concludes. Now, we've told the story, we read the story, told the story, read the explanation of the story. So let's just be sure we have in mind just a simple story, just the surface. A man has a field, sows good seed, and the enemy comes at night and sows bad seed, and the workers are not aware, and nothing is noticed until the seed sprouts, the roots begin to go deeper, and the plant is seen. At first, when the plant comes up of the wheat and of the tares, and we'll explain in a second, you cannot distinguish which one is which. But in a little while, as the plant begins to seed out, you can see that there are two different plants in that field. The wheat would be one color, and the seed of the tares would be a grayish color rather than a golden type color. And you can distinguish quite easily at a certain stage of growth what can or can't be good. All right, now let's try to explain the details about the tares. They're called dornel, D-A-R-N-E-L, bearded dornel, these tares that are mentioned here. In some translations, you have an idea of corn. In this translation, it talks about wheat. Definitely it is a grain, but it is a grain like wheat that would grow. And then the tares are also a weed that grows, and the plant itself looks just like wheat as it is growing. But this bearded dornel is not good to eat. In fact, it is slightly poisonous. Now, the idea of slightly poisonous gets me when I read a commentary that says that, because it's either poisonous or it isn't, we used to think. Well, they don't mean that probably if you ate it, you would not die. But it has a bitter taste, and it could make someone sick if they ate it. And so the dornel, or the tares, is not good for anything. Now, actually what happened in Jesus' story is the workers planted good seed, and someone who hated the man, came and scattered this bearded dornel seed in the same field. When it begins to grow, it grows to a certain time before you know that the enemy has done anything. And then the workers see, as it begins to seed, that we've got a problem. This is not all good wheat. This is that poisonous bearded dornel plant. Did you plant this? Certainly not. Well, then do you want us to go with our implements, hoes, and whatever else, and take the bad out from where there is good? And he said, it's not possible now to do that. Now, why does he say that? Well, lots of times when you plant, if you are a farmer or even a gardener, you come to a time as things begin to grow that you take the bad out, leave the good. It's called weeding it, you're getting it out, getting the weeds out so the good can grow. But by the time the wheat and the dornel have grown that you can recognize there is a difference, two things have happened. Number one, not only is it where you can see it, but number two, their roots are intertwined. So if you were to take a hoe and go out into a field such as described here, and you start chopping the weed and pulling it, you're going to chop the root and the weed of the good grain as well as the weed. You destroy it. You just can't do it. It was a bad trick, but it worked that this enemy played on this man. And so Jesus said you just have to leave it alone until the time of harvest. You can't weed it down. You can't fix it down. Just let it grow. And when it is ready to harvest, we will harvest it, and then there will be a separation. And what was usually done in biblical times, we're told, women were hired to take the grain and spread it out before them and literally pick out the bad seed from the wheat. You could eat the wheat, you could get the other out, the colors were distinguishable, and you could do it. But it was a chore, it was a job, but you would have wasted everything if you didn't go to the trouble to do that. And so the good grain then would have been kept and used in eating and foodstuffs, feeding the animals, but the bearded kernel would be burned so that it was pure. Now, I can tell it again, but I've told it about 4 times already. Okay. What's the point of this parable? What is Jesus teaching? He's not teaching us about agriculture. He's not telling you what you can do to hurt your enemy. He's not really just talking about how they handle it in calm and with common sense, so that's a lesson you can learn. Let's see 5 things that Jesus is telling us and teaching us about life and about the kingdom and being right with God. Number 1, there is always a hostile power at work. It's true in our lives. In the explanation that Jesus gives, he talks about the devil, sons of the evil one, the devil. Now, I know there are lots of folks that are so modern today, and they think they know so much, and they've got it all figured out, and they laugh at the simple truths of the Bible, and they don't believe as you have experienced life to be, but they don't have an explanation except sometimes just seems like some silly definitions. I think all of us will admit that there are times that we didn't really intend to do the bad or ugly thing we ended up doing. There are times that we intend to do something good and nice and to say something nice, and we don't ever do it. Do we not know what we think? Can we not make decisions? Do we not know what's right and wrong, what ought to be? Or is there something in creation, in the thwarting of God's creation with disobedience and jealousy and sin that makes something now an enemy? God loves us. He's the Creator. He's Almighty. But the Bible gives some indication that some of those that He created fell from that position and became by choice God's enemy. Satan, the devil, the evil one. And he's constantly trying to thwart God's purposes and the results that God expects from God's love and from mankind's response. So when he says a man came and threw bearded darnel into the field so that it would grow, he's not just telling us about one incident. He's saying there is always an evil power at work attempting to thwart the purposes of God. And whether we can explain it to everybody's satisfaction, we all know by experience that there are times, as I have already asked, when we intend to stand strong and not give in to something we know that is evil and will hurt us, but we find ourselves going along with the crowd or doing it by ourselves, even when it's not what we want to do. Some of the critical, and by that it doesn't mean negative, but just real critical commentaries often will say something like this: that man both loves and hates his sin at the same time. We don't want to sin, but we won't give it up. We don't like what sin does to us and to others, but we continue to do it. Why? It's unreasonable. It's not logical. It ought not be that way. Now, it's not like Flip Wilson. You remember the comedian? Every time he did something and he was caught, he would just say, as you remember, the devil made me do it. Well, that's not an excuse that we're not responsible. So I'm not saying the Bible teaches that. But there is an evil influence at work all of the time tempting us, influencing us, trying to hurt God in the kingdom, and somehow trying to get our followers. And so the man says here, why did this happen? And Jesus says to this man and the others who would ask, an enemy, the devil, is at work. All right, number two, let's draw this. Sometimes we get to looking at people and groups of people, and we make the mistake of putting them in other subgroups, or maybe we take some individuals and lump them together. And if we're not careful, we start saying, these folks are okay, they're kind of like I am, and these folks don't fit, and these folks are evil, and these folks are just an abomination. Judging, perhaps condemning. We don't like to think that we do that, but there are some ways that we do. But perhaps more often than really doing it, what we say is, this is not the way it ought to be. Something ought to be done. Someone ought to do something. Now, put that to the side and let's think about this. Have you ever met someone and just at first and in the first few times you were with them just decided you didn't like that person at all? There was just something about that person that just makes your skin crawl, just kind of like your fingernails on the blackboard, they're sometimes just so flat. And then as time passed, this stranger became more well known, and you even began to be friendly, and you might even begin to call him your friend, but if you had judged him at first meeting, you would have made a terrible mistake. You flip that. Sometimes someone comes into your life and you just fall in love with them, and I don't mean necessarily romantic love, but you just like them so much, and they are nice, and you want to be their friend, and you can't think of anything but just the fun you would have with them. But as time passes, you get to see and know them a little better, and you don't trust them anymore. And in fact, you find some things out about them that you don't appreciate. Now, what are we saying here? We're saying we need to not be too quick to judge our fellow man. You see this in what's going on. Everything's growing, everything looks the same, everything's fine. Got a good crop. But if you wait a little longer and give it time, we say to give somebody, enough rope, and they'll hang themselves. Well, you let these plants grow to the place that you see it's not all wheat. It's not all good grain. Some of it is poisonous and would harm you, and some would be a blessing to you. So as we think about people and life and the world and say, well, why is it this way? Why isn't it different? I think it ought to be different. We need to be a little bit careful. It's hard to distinguish. And sometimes we can be a little too quick to judge. I said there were 5 things, and I've combined 2 of them here. First of all, I just want to get to 5 again. There's always a hostile power, and then sometimes it's hard to distinguish folks, and we need to give a little more time and not be too quick to either accept or reject, to praise or condemn. In fact, and this will be perhaps the 4 and 5 points here are things that we will combine a little bit, but I want to be sure that we get the difference in what we've set up at this point in these next 2. There's always an evil power. There's always a hostile power. It's hard to distinguish right, wrong, and people sometimes, and we need not to be too quick to judge. We might make a mistake. I'm going to try to illustrate this again from the story. I said a while ago, if you took a hoe, took an implement, and you went out and you tried to take some of the bad darnel away from the good wheat, you'd do two things. You'd pull some of it apart, and you'd pull some of the roots of the good seed out at the same time. What will we do? Well, he said nothing. But I've said the sermon is not now, not nothing. We can't fix some things. I've always had and perhaps not always, I had to learn this also, but I've, in recent years, found myself telling nearly everybody when they come to me with a problem and need counseling, whether it's financial, whether it's family, whether it's a job, whether it's a friend, whether it's marital, whatever. I find myself telling people, you know, you just can't fix everything. You just have to accept some things the way they are, at least for a time. But accepting things for a time doesn't mean they won't be fixed eventually. I'm not going to do it this morning, but I'm going to preach from the little book of Habakkuk before long on Sunday morning. It's a little book, 3 chapters over the Old Testament. And in Habakkuk, the prophet is saying to God, God, why don't you do something? God said, I'm doing something. He said, well, it's the wrong thing. And the meaning in one part of the book of Habakkuk is this. God has plenty of time to judge, to bless, and to punish. We get all worked up because we've got 70 or 80 or 90 or 100 years on earth and we have all eternity in heaven. But we want everything to get fixed like we think it ought to be during our lifetime, when it's bothering us. Sometimes when God doesn't do what we think he ought to, we begin to lose our faith in how good he is and how powerful he is. Let's remember that we could make mistakes in our judgments. And so, not now. Just wait a while. You can't fix it all right now. Now, this not to say don't look at people and make some good judgment about who your friends are. I was in a court case up in Rust, Texas, a number of years ago, and it was a case of a husband and wife, a mother and father, trying to get custody of the 4 children. And this was when nearly no judge in Texas would give custody of minor children to the daddy. But the mother was so bad in this case, it ended up with the daddy getting the full custody of all the 4 children. And I was testifying as a friend of daddy in the case. And it was hard to testify, to say the mother shouldn't have the children, but what she was doing to them and in front of them, and it was just horrible. And the daddy did get the custody of the children. But it took time, and it was unfair, and it was not the way it ought to be, but it had to be done. So, and all of this mixture, what goes on and how do you fix it? Can you fix it now? What I want to come to, and I'm trying to make the biggest point I can at this point. Even though all that we've said is right, you can't fix everything, and you can't do some things now, doesn't mean that it's going to be that way forever. Let's look again at the story. The time will come, as Jesus explains this. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reaper are the angels. And the tares are gathered up, burned with fire. That's the way it'll be in the end. Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they'll gather out of his kingdom all the things that cause stumbling, and those that do the wrong thing, iniquity, and they shall be cast into the furnace of fire. So now we can't judge and we can't make good judgments, but that does not mean that judgment does not come. People think they get by with things and they pull one over on the good folk and they're going to do whatever they please and nothing's going to happen. Well, maybe for a while. But everyone will have to make an account of himself before God eventually. Now, just what if, let's just do this real quickly. What if you were called before God and just had to give an account of all the good and the bad that's been in your life? Some of us say, well, I did a lot more good than bad. And that's probably true. But what makes a person a sinner? 1,000 sins? 100 sins? Or one sin? I'm trying to be silly, but one sin is enough to make you a sinner. And so you can't say, well, I've done more good than bad. Well, you know, that. You'll have to stand before God to give an account, and the Bible doesn't explain how it all is done, but everybody is accountable to God for their life and the sin they've committed and the decisions they've made and the lifestyle they have chosen and the influence, good and bad, that they have exerted. And none of us, not one of us, could say, God, I've never done anything wrong. And one sin would be enough to make us a sinner. And if God were just honest, He could condemn every one of us to punishment and damnation. I get a little amused. My wife is not addicted to this, but she likes to watch Law and Order on TV. And I don't mind it either, but we watch it quite a bit. Did you know that every time in a court they convict somebody of the charges, it doesn't mean he was all bad, but he was wrong bad. And if they set someone free and declare him innocent, he was innocent of the crime charged against him in court, but it doesn't mean he's without sin. All are sinners, and the wages of sin is death. And so if we wait, judgment does come. And I'm simply trying to say to any of you, if you think you're getting by with anything and putting something past God, think again. We spend a lot of our life putting up a facade and fooling one another and impressing one another. We do a pretty good job of it. Well, we don't even want everybody that we know to know everything about us. So we put our best foot forward, we put our facade, we make it look good. But God really knows. And that brings us to the fifth note. Not only is there a judgment coming, but God Himself is the one who's going to judge. Now, if you are a Christian, most of you are, you don't have anything to worry about when we think about the judgment of God. Because when God looks at you, He sees not only you, but He sees the blood of Jesus. It just covers you and your sins are forgiven. Not because you deserve it, but because He loves you and He's provided a way that He can forgive you and right and truth and everything still be like it. So don't worry if you are a Christian. But if you're not a Christian, you must worry because you are a sinner. Well, let's add to that all the things that we'd like God to change. And we can't do it now, but we have to wait. Now, eventually it's going to get turned right side up. But God's the one who's going to make those decisions. And the best way I can say it, I think, and this is real silly to do it this way, but I'm going to do it this way, and then I'm finished. Have you ever watched a ball game? And I probably told you this in the months we've been coming. Have you ever watched a ball game? Now, I watched the basketball finals, pros. I watched Houston in the Warriors, and I was disappointed. Now, I wanted Houston to win. And I picked out, I don't know how many calls the referees in that last game, how many calls they missed. And they were all against my team. You know? And when they showed the replay, most every time the referee was right. But at the time I saw it, I thought, oh no, they're not calling it. You know what I'm saying? Or let's say a baseball game. And the guy is rounding third, and he's going to slide in at home plate. And he's my guy, and I think the catcher missed the tag, and he was safe, and he got to run. And they called him out. And when they show it again in a minute on slow motion replay, the catcher actually touches it before he got to the base. I could be wrong in making the call. What I want you to understand is this. What this passage says is, these guys are saying, look what's happened, what's wrong, should we fix it? Can't fix it now? What are we going to do about it? We're just going to have to wait. But at the end, God is going to come and he's going to separate and he's going to make the judgment. And God never makes a bad call. We're not going to fool him if we're not a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you're not a Christian. If you're not saved, you're not saved. If you haven't made a commitment to the Lord, you haven't done it. But God's going to judge. He's the judge. And he never makes a mistake. He never sees it wrong. He never is in a place that he can't see it right. It's always the truth. So again, you can tell the story again and again, but you've got the story, a little simple story. Seed sown, bad seed on top, growing up, can't fix it now, but it'll be separated. And he said, this is what you see in life. You got good folks and bad folks. Good folks are the believers, bad folks are the son of the devil. And the devil himself sowed the bad seed. Now at the end of time, at the time of judgment, the reapers will be sent forth and God will separate the Christians from the unchristians. Good from the bad, the sheep from the goats. And those who are saved will go to glory. And those that are lost will be thrown. And there will be gnashing of teeth, crying and screaming. Eternal destruction. It's not a fault for us to say, boy, I'm glad they're finally going to. No, we shouldn't be that way. We should be sad that we've not reached them so they can go to heaven with us. But when the time of judgment comes, those without Jesus have no chance. And though it sounds good, there's no such thing in the Bible as a second chance after death. You're either a Christian or you're not. You're ready or you're not. You're saved or you're not. And it's not that God wants to make it tough. God's done everything to make it easy. You've messed up, but I love you anyhow. But you owe a debt that you can't pay. I'll pay it for you. And all you have to do is admit you couldn't do it by yourself and accept what I've done on your behalf, and it's going to be over. And it's not logical to argue with that. That's wonderful what God has done for us. It's all pictured again in the stories that Jesus is telling. So we don't see many farmers sowing seed. We don't see enemies out there putting bad seed in trying to make it bad. But you can understand it happened and what he's saying. So when you see things you don't like, you're probably right. But you can't fix it all. But God's got it in control. And eventually it's going to be done right. And he's the one who will make the decisions. And we either will be blessed eternally or have eternal damage. I know people say, well, you shouldn't try to scare people. Well, I'm not trying to scare you, but you ought to be scared if you don't know who Jesus is. I'm not trying to manipulate you in any way. But I am trying to warn you what the Bible teaches. Most of you, if not all, already have given your heart to Jesus. You're doing your best to serve Him. But if you've never consciously said, Lord, I've messed up. I don't like myself sometimes. I've messed up so badly. Will you forgive me? Can I start over? Can we wipe the slate clean? Can I try again? And He will say, yes. I love you. Jesus is taking care of this. And if you'll just trust Him, it's going to be all right. If you've not done that, you do it right back. That quickly. You say yes. Yes to Him. You need to do that. If so, please do. For your sake. And in a moment, we're going to have just a brief time to say, you've ever done this before? I'm going to do this today. From now on, you can count on me, Lord. And I want people to know that I'm going to do my best with them. And when we sing in a moment, if you'll just come down and say, preacher, I want the world to know that I want Jesus to be my Savior. Would you do that if you need to? You need to join the church. Would you come and move your membership here or become a part of what the church is doing in this one location? Let's stand together. Remember the little story. Real simple. And mainly, there's just the main points. Okay? There's going to be a time of judgment. Not now, but it's coming. You must be ready for it. We're going to sing. If you need to come publicly to either say, I'm accepting Jesus, or I want to join the church, we'll invite you to come. I'll meet you here if God leads you. Let's sing. You come if God wants you to.